Hi there. I'm going to take a few minutes today and talk about disordered eating. As with yesterday's topic, suicide, this is something, unfortunately, for me, that has impacted me a great deal throughout my entire life, essentially. I've spent a lot of time talking about it. I've spent a lot of time trying to help other people recover from disordered eating. And it's a really, really tough subject. One of the ways in which it's an unusual sort of addictive behavior is that it's impossible to stop doing entirely. That may seem obvious once you think about it, but the implications of that are enormous. So an alcoholic can stop drinking, and a drug addict can stop taking drugs, and someone suffering from OCD can, through exposure therapy and other CBT treatments, stop those behaviors entirely. But we can never ever stop eating. So we have to, those of us with disordered eating cognitions and behaviors, have to face the reality of our cognitive distortions every single day, whether we're in recovery or not in recovery. And we have to socialize around our cognitive distortions constantly. We have to manage them as best we can every single day in a way that keeps our body and our mind healthy, but still allows some measure of the behavior that's gotten us in trouble in the first place, or the lack of behavior, because it's really a negative behavior most of the time, unless we're talking about binging. We have to manage that every single day for our entire lives. There's no escape from it. Unless we die, and then there's an escape, which I don't recommend, by the way. A couple of the things I wanted to cover today is that, as with, I think, all things, disordered eating takes place on a spectrum, meaning that it can be a relatively mild form of disordered eating. And by disordered eating, I mean any behavior or cognition related to food or body image that creates obsessive thinking or behaviors, or generally both. So it can be anywhere from I'm trying this new diet, and it's like the 10th new diet I've tried, and I've spent a lot of money on it, and I'm buying into the whole thing. Go kind of from that, where it's not a huge engulfing problem in your life, all the way to you are institutionalized because you're so underweight that your life is in danger. So those are just two examples. There are other ends of both extremes, obviously. How do we know if our thoughts, because we all, even healthy people, have lots of thoughts about eating, because it's something we do a lot of, and it's a big part of our culture and our lives. So how do we know if our thoughts about food and our bodies are to the point of being what I would call pathological, but that's a scary word, to the point of being an issue for us in our lives? It's something that we should consider seeking treatment for, and really taking measures to adjust. How do we know that? And for me, the way to determine that in this, really, and in all questions of mental health, is it interfering consistently with the quality of our life? That really sort of clarifies it for me in an instant. Let's take depression for a second. Let's say I feel kind of blue, I'm kind of down on a day, but the next day I'm okay, and the day kind of came and went, and it wasn't that big of a deal. Would I call that clinical depression? Not really, because every human being alive experiences bad days. What I would call depression is not being able to get out of bed day after day, calling in sick to work, not being able to hold conversations with other people because you're so depleted or, dead feeling inside. It's the same way with disordered eating. So if you're just going on a diet, trying to lose a few pounds, but you generally kind of feel okay about yourself, you're probably okay. If, however, each day, throughout the day, you're looking at your body in the mirror, you're assessing yourself, you're judging other people, that's a big one. You're trying to measure yourself compared to other people, maybe even belittle other people in your mind or verbally to make yourself feel better. If you're obsessive about what you eat, where you eat, how you can eat it, or if you are binging in secret, eating in secret, these behaviors are more extreme. And my belief is that we don't need someone to tell us necessarily that they're problematic. We know in our heart when we veer off the rails and we're going somewhere funky. So I'm going to validate for you right now that you have that knowledge inside of you, if you have the strength to simply own it. And once you can say to yourself, wow, okay, I'm spending a lot of time thinking about this, and it's causing me a pretty significant amount of psychic pain, and I don't like that because it's taking energy away from the other parts of my life that I want to be living. That's the real problem, right? It's putting so much focus on this issue of body size or food intake or lack thereof. It's putting so much emphasis on that we're losing all kinds of resources that we could be putting towards everything else. And that is a tragedy. It's a waste. When I think of all of the energy that I have wasted with distorted cognition surrounding my body image and food, it's hard not to get emotional about it. It's hard to imagine what I could have done with those resources. Of course, as with anything, those issues led me to where I am today, and I'm now in a position to help others. So that's a good thing. But you take my point. If we are spending so much time obsessing over one thing to the exclusion of many other things, we are doing ourselves a very profound disservice, right? Okay, so what do? We have admitted to ourselves. And let me say also, if you think your thoughts and behaviors around food are weird and you're ashamed of them and there's something wrong with you, let me confidently assure you right now that in this country in particular, this is such a widespread issue. You are not alone. And it's also an issue, like many issues of mental health, that is associated with stigma. So we got a lot of people suffering and not a lot of people talking about it. And that isolates those of us who need help, which is a tragic thing as well. So what do you do if you finally can admit to yourself, there's something going on here? I know it. I admit it. I'm tired of it. I want to do better. The number one thing you need to do, sounds simple. It's not, a huge radical idea. You have got to reach out for help. I don't think, particularly with disordered eating and cognitive distortions related to body image, I don't think that any of us can heal on our own. Okay, maybe there's one or two people in the world who are amazing and they can do it on their own. But I know it's not me and it's probably not you. And even if it was, it would take us a lot longer to do that work on our own. And that means we would suffer a lot longer. So look, if this is something that's an issue for you in your life, I really recommend seeking out a great therapist, hopefully someone who has expertise in your specific area of disordered eating or cognitive distortions. Because you've heard me talking a lot about, if you're restricting, if you're binging, if it's a body dysmorphic kind of situation, all of those things fall under the heading of what I'm talking about today. But they're all really different things, and they are all treated somewhat differently as well, or can be. So oftentimes I think CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is good for some of this. Not all of it. It really depends on what sort of person you are. So I guess that's another thing I need to talk about in my vlogs is how do we find the right therapist, right? And how do we define our issue well enough and ourselves well enough to find the best therapy for us. So I will address that. And remember also, though, that any help is probably better than no help. So even if you can't find the exact right person who specializes in your thing, there is power just in talking. There is. I believe that. Talking to a compassionate person who is not invested in the outcome of your situation, it's magic, no less than that. And that's what therapy is. It's magic. Okay. So I guess sometime next week I'll talk about finding the help that's best tailored for you. And of course, that's why I founded PsycheFinder in the first place, because people do struggle with that. And that will be a place where you can fill out an extensive questionnaire, and we will personally, like as in a human being, we will find the right therapist for you. So my website is not quite done yet. I'm still working on it. In the meantime, you'll have to do some of those things for yourself. So again, if you are struggling with this, know you're not alone. There's nothing, it's not a flaw in your character. It's very much related to our culture. And you need to talk to somebody about it. Suffering in silence never healed anybody. And we also need to not just talk to our therapist about it, but we need to be open about it and not ashamed generally. You know, we don't have to go telling people our whole story, but it's okay to say something along the lines of, you know, I struggle with this. And the more of us that can do that, the more of us there will who are be able to respond and say, you know, I struggle with this too. And that seems like a much better world to live in to me. So thanks for listening today. If you want to reach out to me on the PsycheFinder website, I always love to hear from you with any thoughts or comments, questions, ideas, anything you got. And I will see you again tomorrow. Thanks again. Bye-bye.